Since the release of my book, The Jerk-Free Workplace, the number one question I have received is, what if my boss is the jerk? Here are a few ideas that might help you out if your boss is the jerk. Number one, you need to learn how to respond to a jerk-like boss and not just react to a jerk-like boss. And one of those choices you could make is to ignore your boss. And I'm quite serious. If your boss is a jerk in a way that isn't impeding your performance, isn't impeding your ability to deliver great service to your customers or work with your teammates, if your boss is a jerk but still not getting in the way of your success, maybe you decide to just live with it, that you learn to live with it some way. Maybe it's through creative scheduling, creative job crafting to change your duties a little bit. Maybe it is ultimately just ignoring the jerk-like behavior that otherwise will eat you up because you make the decision that, well, it's not going to impact me. I'm not going to let it impact me. This is who they are. They're a jerk. I've tried to change them. I can't change them. So I've learned to understand that that's just who they are, but it's not getting in the way of my work. Now, if you make this decision to ignore your jerk-like behavior from your boss, then you truly have to embrace that. And that means you can't go home and complain about your boss to your spouse or your friends. You cannot complain about your boss to your coworkers. That's not ignoring it. If you keep complaining about it, then there is an issue that you do need to resolve, and it's going to eat you up inside. But if you can truly ignore it, or think about how you respond in a positive, constructive way, that is one option you do need to consider. Another approach, before I get to some constructive solutions, is what I would call the nuclear option. Hitting the nuclear button. In other words, if it is really, really bad, if your boss is demonstrating truly jerk-like behavior that is abusive, that is bullying, that is threatening, that you just can't live with, if you are losing sleep over your boss, if this is affecting your mental and physical health, you have to ask yourself, is this worth it? Is it worth the cost? And I'm going to suggest, no, it's not worth your health. So you need to consider pushing the nuclear button, which could mean quitting your job. Now, I would never, far be it from me, to give a stranger advice to quit their job without having a serious backup plan in place. So please make sure you do have a plan in place. But that is, of course, an option you ultimately have to consider. What are the costs of a jerk boss? Can I put up with this forevermore? And if the answer is no, it's affecting your health, it's affecting your family, then you may need to make that difficult decision to quit your job or to transfer to another department. Or another, what I call nuclear button option, is you may need to talk to HR. You may need to go over your boss's head and have a very difficult conversation. If you do those things, though, I want to suggest do those as a last resort. In other words, you've tried talking to your boss on multiple occasions. You've tried to find a solution to the situation. Go over their head, go to HR, prepare, do your homework, do your research. Don't make it about you. Make it about the best interests of your team and your company. Make it about the best interests of your company from a culture point of view and how you need to be true to your values. So it's not about you. You have to have that partnership mindset if you do that. So do your homework, and realistically, you do have to be prepared for the consequences. But that is an option you need to consider if you've tried everything else. Okay, so if you can't ignore your boss's behavior anymore and you're not ready to hit the nuclear button option, then you have the third option, which is to fix your jerk-like boss. Okay, maybe let's not use the word fix. Let's have a more constructive phrase. How about coaching your boss in a constructive way to change their jerk-like behavior? So here are some tools that will help you do just that. Let's start with some of the mindset stuff, because this is really important. Before you go and sit down with your boss, take to heart that they are a human being. They're another person just like you. Having a challenging conversation with your boss shouldn't be all that different than having a challenging conversation with anyone else in your workplace. Now, I get it. Yeah, they have some influence over you, so it is a little bit different. It can be that much more intimidating. But ultimately, remember, they are a human being. They have families. They have the same concerns and fears, perhaps, that you do. For my book, The Jerk-Free Workplace, I interviewed dozens and dozens of managers and asked them, what do you want your employees to know about you? And time again, I got responses like, I want them to know that I'm a real human being, that I have feelings, that I have fears and stressors that keep me awake at night. I want them to know that I am kept awake at night thinking about them, worrying about whether I'm doing a good enough job or not. I want them to know that I want to help them. And sometimes I don't come across that way. Sometimes I can come across a bit like a jerk or a bit gruff. But I really do have the best interests of the company and them in mind. And look, we're talking about jerk-like bosses here, so you might be rolling your eyes right now and saying, yeah, well, that's not the case with my boss. But hear my message. Do remember that underneath that lousy behavior is a beating heart. There is a human being there that has a lot of the same frustrations and feelings you do. And so go into that conversation with that mindset. Another mindset approach to take is to remind yourself that you might be doing them a favor. You might just be doing them a favor because nobody's had the guts to tell them this before, and they just didn't know. Maybe they never received, and we know this from the research, they maybe never received proper training into how to do their jobs. They just don't know any better, and they picked up bad habits. They've picked up horribly bad habits, maybe, yes, but they just don't know any better. And you're doing them a favor by speaking truth to power, and they may actually respect you even more. So adopt that mindset. May not be the case, but they may end up respecting you more. And again, when I've interviewed dozens and dozens, if not hundreds of managers around the world, they tell me that all the time. I respect people. I want people to come and tell me the truth and speak up. Another thing to remember before you schedule, and do schedule a conversation with your boss and prepare them for what the conversation is going to be about so they have time to get used to it emotionally, psychologically. But before you sit down to have that conversation, don't view it as a one-time event. View it as the start of a process. View it as the first conversation in a series of conversations, not the one and only conversation. And the reason I say this is because if you view it as just the conversation, you're going to lose so much sleep. You're going to get so stressed out because it becomes this epic world championship of conversations. And you put so much pressure on yourself and on this one event because you're viewing it as a singular event. So view it as a process. This is just the start of a process of you approaching and working with your boss to find some constructive solutions to the situation. Before you talk to your boss as well, check your motives. So make sure you are doing this for the right reasons and check your emotions. You do not want to have a conversation with your boss that is emotionally charged. So the last thing you want to do is schedule a conversation 10 minutes after your boss just drove you nuts by doing something jerk-like in a meeting and you're still fuming and you're not over it. Give it some time, sleep on it, give it some time to digest, for you to calm down so that you can go in and be as calm and be as present and focused as possible. Do your homework. Now, I've already mentioned this, but do your homework. Come into a conversation prepared, whatever that may look like, depending on the issue. Prepared with stats, prepared with research, and especially come prepared with ideas and solutions. I said it earlier. Managers, bosses want ideas, they want suggestions, they want solutions, they don't want to hear problems. So come armed with solutions, come armed with some ideas or suggestions that you can make with that partnership mindset in place. And again, frame the conversation in such a way that it's not just about you. Frame it in such a way that you want to come up with a solution that is in the best interest of your team, because this is affecting your team perhaps, it's affecting your company's performance, it's affecting your customer service, and frame it in such a way that you want to help them succeed. So you want to help them do their jobs more effectively. You want them to be able to lead in a more positive, constructive way because that will reflect well on them. So frame it in a way that you are coming at it from the best interests of your company, of the values that your company stands for, of your customer service, that you want to make sure that you are delivering incredible, outstanding customer service, that you care about your company, you care about the brand of your company, the reputation of your company, you care about your cultural values and the impact this is having on your culture. So frame it as much as possible away from yourself and in the best interest of your company, your team, and your boss. And if you are offering solutions and coming from a true partnership mindset, then be prepared to take some of the responsibility yourself. Even if you think, yeah, you know what, I'm only 10% of the problem here, be the bigger person. Own up to 20%, 30%. These are artificial numbers I'm just making up. I'm speaking metaphorically here. But you need to be prepared to own a piece of the problem. And to say, you know what, if I'm part of the problem here, let me know what I can do to support you. And when you have these challenging conversations, especially with your boss, it's especially important that you meet in a neutral area. Do not meet in your boss's office. That's home field advantage. Don't meet in your turf. You want to meet in a neutral, comfortable, safe place, undistracted, with no distractions, no computers, no smartphones, where you can have a really focused conversation. And as you're talking to your boss, feel free to use notes. Come prepared, as I said. So have some notes. Have them written down in bullet point. Have your notes ready and refer to them. There's nothing wrong with that because you want to be prepared. The last thing you want to do is leave that meeting and realize that evening that you forgot a really critical point. So come with notes and come even with a conversation framework. In my book, The Jerk-Free Workplace, I offer all sorts of different frameworks that work really, really effectively just to frame the conversation. It doesn't have to be overly complicated. It could be as simple as saying, here's where I'm coming from. I'd like to hear now where you're coming from and how you see the issue. And then, is there anything I can do to support you on this issue so we can find a solution together? Is there anything I could start doing or anything I should stop doing that could help make this situation easier for both of us? I also want to remind you of that metaphor of ripping off the Band-Aid really quickly, because far too often we ignore conflict, especially when it's from our boss. We ignore the jerk-like behavior. We keep kicking it down the road, and so it becomes bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger, and it becomes bigger in our minds. So now it's not just an elephant in the room, it is a herd of elephants stampeding in the room because we've blown it into these huge proportions, and it's become this epic thing. The longer you wait, the more difficult it can be to have that conversation. So be courageous enough to do it when you need to do it. And also know this, I cannot tell you the number of times where employees have said to me, they finally sat down and had a really challenging, what they thought was going to be an incredibly uncomfortable conversation with their boss. And guess what? It wasn't that uncomfortable. The boss was relieved. They were relieved. It caused them to lose that elephant off their shoulders. They felt so much lighter just having the conversation. They'd blown it up thinking it was going to be this huge deal, and it turned out to be nothing at all. So don't put this off. Be courageous. Act now. And finally, even if the conversation exceeded your wildest expectations, even if the conversation went wildly well to the point that there's puppies and rainbows and unicorns in the room, schedule a follow-up conversation. Schedule a follow-up conversation to check in with one another, just to see how things settle a few days later or a week later, just to see if any other thoughts rose to the surface, but also check in with that spirit of supporting each other. So schedule an appointment in this meeting to follow up. It doesn't have to be long, it could be 10 minutes, just to see how both respective parties are feeling, if progress has been made, and if there's anything that either of you can do to support one another. So, what about you? How have you dealt with a jerky boss? What tips do you have for people that might have a really jerky boss that they have to live with? I would love to hear your comments in the comment box. Have you ever had success in dealing with a jerky boss that wildly exceeded your expectation? Please leave a comment in the comment box. And if you haven't yet joined our growing community, please hit the subscribe button. Join our growing community as we talk about inspiring, rocking, jerk-free workplaces that drive outrageous results.